On today's show, Gabriel Marous, law firm founder, international business attorney, and expert on leveraging VAs with AI to help law firms operate more efficiently. We'll be talking about how to build high-impact virtual assistant teams that are fully AI-enabled to improve productivity, eliminate operational bottlenecks, and give law firm owners the freedom to focus on higher-value work.
An AI-enabled virtual assistant, it's basically a virtual assistant who's been trained and who's competent in using AI tools and using it in her function. All right. We remain consistent in terms of our function. We're not trying to have one person do everything just because there is AI. You have an admin assistant becoming a much better, efficient admin assistant by using AI tools that help her become that better admin assistant. Same thing for a marketing assistant.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jason, and joining me today is Gabriel Marous. Hey, Gabriel, it's great to see you.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
It's great, man. And so for a lot of law firm owners, as we know, growth creates a whole new set of challenges, right? The firm gets bigger, revenue goes up, but at the same time, the demands on the owner, those also go up, right? More clients, more staff, more problems, just overall more complexity. And so a lot of firm owners, they know they need help, but like many small business owners, we start to struggle with exactly what to delegate, who to hire to do what, how to then train those people, and ultimately start building an organization that can grow and not be completely dependent on them. And now at the same time, AI is creating a whole new opportunity as well. And not to say AI replaces people in all things, but you have the perspective that AI can make good people dramatically more productive. And as you put it, and I love this, it's called what you call leverage on top of leverage. So today I want to get into how law firms can build leverage through virtual assistants, systems, and now use AI. Also want to talk a little bit about why VA hires fail, why firms should think about hiring by function instead of hiring by role or generalists, and ultimately, and importantly, why systems need to come before scale. Okay. And before we dive into all that, I just want to introduce you to the audience. Gabriel, he's a law firm founder, an international business attorney, an entrepreneur. He's also the founder of VA Professionals, a company that helps law firms build and manage remote teams. But long before Gabriel was helping other firms build remote teams, he was doing it inside his own practice for over a decade now. He's been building and managing VA teams in the Philippines. He's refined hiring and delegation systems, ultimately creating leverage through people, processes, and technology, right? All the key things. So today, he now helps other law firms apply those same principles. So Gabriel, as I was preparing for this conversation, right, this idea of leverage, which I love, so it keeps coming up. But I want to talk about how as a firm grows, right, success, it just creates its own new set of challenges, right? So you've built a successful law practice, and I know you eventually took a decent sized in-house team and migrated that over to, leveraging a virtual team. And so what led you down that path?
Very, very good question. And thank you for having me on the show. I've been following what you've been doing. Great work. So the genesis, goes back a few years back, really, even before COVID. Somehow we all have ideas that we don't really pursue or until the opportunity really comes up. And for a long time, I was always thinking to work from home longer, and I would never go to the office 5 days a week. But of course, back then it was difficult to get clients to follow because clients were attached to coming to the office. So fast forwarding, COVID happened, like everybody knows. And that definitely changed everybody's mindset and attitude towards the remote work and towards the remote everything. But even before that, about 12 years ago, I wanted to try, just very small. So at the time, I hired one virtual assistant. I recall the first one was from the Ukraine. Then that didn't work so well. I tried then from India, didn't work so great either. Ultimately, I heard about the Philippines and I tried the Philippines. I tried two people and one worked very, very well. So she was already with the firm 12 years ago. And that was many years before COVID. And at the time, I think we were running a staff of 10 people in an office in New York City. When COVID happened, as we all know, everybody went home. And for 2 months, nobody was working except my VA in the Philippines, which was very interesting in and of itself.
So what happened there? Your in-house team, they go home, right? We remember this time. We all started working from
Yep.
home, and you're saying your team just went home and didn't even stop doing work. They just sat at home.
Yeah, well, we had the first month, we definitely had to stop. So it was important for everyone to go to take care of their family. First priority first, being safe and taking care of family. Everyone had to get used to this life. At first, we didn't think it would be for that long. And then after a month, I figured, well, we need to get back to business. Otherwise, there's no firm to get back to. So at
Right.
that point, I asked the team if they would join back remotely, Zoom, all that. Some were ready to go, others not so much. At the time, you may recall, everyone was getting paid to stay home anyhow. And that was important at the time. But I had at that time, even the VA from the Philippines was still working full time. So at that point, I thought, well, if no one can come back or very few people can come back, why not increase the team we had in the Philippines, the one person we had in the Philippines? So I talked to her and she said, well, Mr. Marous, I'll be happy to help recruit more people. People are looking for work in the middle of COVID. And that's kind of how it all worked out. And
So
by the
let me ask
time,
you this:
Mhm.
when obviously you had the in-house team, eventually that slowly went away. But as you hired VAs, just in what were some of the biggest problems you were trying to solve at that point that you felt like a VA could help you handle?
So that's the concept of being as a small firm, and we all go through this. When you have your entire team at the end of the day going home, nothing gets done, obviously. So the idea for me at first, hiring a VA remotely for even 12 years ago, was to have some level of work getting done overnight while we all go home. So she was very helpful in that regards, whether it's preparing documents, putting things together, so that by the time the office team would come to the office, there would be work already done. I know big law firms have that set up already. They have 24/7 situation, but as a small firm, I could not afford that. So that was the initial idea, having her complete the physical team so that she could do work while they are sleeping.
So I want to go more to the root of the challenge here, right? And that's just ultimately that all of us as entrepreneurs or business owner, law firms owner, you get to a point you simply just can't do everything yourself, right? Like you can't continue to grow just by simply working harder yourself. So you have to start to find ways to delegate. And so that's kind of the piece that I want to get into here a little bit. And then we're going to talk about more how we can solve that in the way that you've done it over the last decade, not just for yourself, but for others now as well. But what are some of the tasks that lawyers should know? These are the things you need to get off your plate first. You need to stop doing these things first. What are some of those things?
So without telling you specifically the thing, I think it's more of a category. You have to think of tasks that must be done, as small as they may be, that if they don't get done, the business doesn't run, but anybody else can do, right? So that's the first part, being able to delegate those things. They must be done, they're small, and anyone else
So
can
is
do
that
them.
the idea of like administrative stuff? Like I've seen kind of the delegation ladders that people talk about, right? Admin, that's always kind of the bottom thing. It's like the lowest value stuff. And ultimately it's the easiest stuff to hire and train for. So you start there. And kind of where do
hmm
you go after that?
Right. The low hanging fruits, I guess, would be the admin kind of work, checking your emails, your calendar, confirming appointments, follow-ups with clients, making sure that people show up the day before your appointment, those kind of things. So these are very administrative in nature. They must be done in order to increase the likelihood of people showing up. That's why you confirm your appointments so that you don't sit around waiting for no reason, but you don't have to do them yourself. And honestly, you don't have to have someone at the office do that. Anybody else can do that as long as they have a phone connection and an email connection. As simple as that. So
all right. So then let's talk about that and just this idea of virtual assistants and using those people to help you build leverage that you can do more as a firm leader and focus on more of the higher value stuff, of course, the stuff that maybe only you can do, or at least that has the most value and things you enjoy. And I think a lot of lawyers and entrepreneurs in general, at some point, I'm in this group as well, but you've tried to hire a VA at some point and have had a bad experience, right? Sometimes a hire doesn't work out. Sometimes you struggle to delegate it. Or I know in some of my experiences, either I didn't hire the right person or I just didn't define the role and what their responsibility. I just threw it all to them, get it done. And of course, that's a recipe for failures. So when a law firm is thinking about hiring a virtual assistant or one that's actually had it fail, in your view, like what are some of the biggest reasons that VA hire went wrong?
Well, I like to say that I probably made all the mistakes any attorney would ever make with a VA over the last 12 years that I worked with VAs. And the biggest mistake is not knowing from the start what you expect from them and expect that they would come and solve all your problems. That's why, I know we will talk about this later, that's why I absolutely say don't think of your VA as a generalist. You have to think about a specialist. They just can't, they're just people like you. They can't do everything. So first is on you as an attorney to know what is it that you want them to produce. And in order for you to know that, you have to know what are the things that you don't want to do. So first, when we have new clients, we tell them first, think about the things you no longer want to do that can be done and that must be done. Can be done by someone else and must be done. Yeah. So in terms of the first mistake is not setting the expectations properly, your own, and in order to then communicate your expectations to your VA. If they don't know what you expect, you'll get just that, anything.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, right? If you don't give people the roadmap or where you want them to go, how are they possibly going to get there? Again, I've made this mistake a lot of different times. So we're going to get into the function-based aspect of the team. But before we get into that more specifically, just generally, why is hiring a generalist versus a specialist the wrong approach when you're talking about a VA?
Right. So from someone who's been practicing for almost 30 years, over 30 years at this point, I know the old way of doing it was you had a very good assistant. We used to call them secretary. We used to call them legal secretary, all kind of names. But that person would do everything for you. They would draft papers, they would answer phone calls, and they were just awesome. I would argue some of them were better than a lot of associates coming into the law firm, brand new. And you would pay them an enormous amount of money because they would stay with you for 15, 20, 30 years to practice. But that's one person. And whenever you lost that one person, you essentially lost your firm, your practice. So that makes sense.
I can imagine. Yeah, you have a person like that who's incredible, right? They have all the historic and institutional knowledge of the firm. They just know how everything works. And then one day they leave or something happens and they're not with you anymore. And you have a massive gap and, more importantly, a massive problem that you maybe don't even know exactly how to solve because you didn't fully understand all of the things that person was really doing. So how does that change now when you hire a VA, right? Is there an ideal, like, first role or place to start with that person? Because that's fundamental. This is the thing. It's the VA is a fundamentally different person than someone you might hire here in the U.S. and have in-house and sort of what their approach to work is versus a VA, right?
Right. Absolutely. So building up on that concept, if you were to hire a VA, a generalist VA, just imagine how difficult it is if you were a physical person in your office. Imagine it's a VA that does everything and anything you ask them. This is not a personal VA for your house. Just do call babysitting or set up or make arrangements, whatever. You want someone who's going to help you run your business. That's why, and again, I tried that before. That's why I know. Just didn't work. That's why essentially at the end, I realized it has to be by functions. What do I mean by functions? You have an admin function, you have a marketing function, you have a account payable function, you have a billing function, you have different functions. So much so that, and we might talk about this later on, but so much so that when you have a VA, I would advise anyone not to create an email with the VA's name, jane@marouslaw.com, for example. No, you have admin@marouslaw.com, so that at any time, if that person is to be replaced, the function remains. The person may change, the function remains. Same for marketing, same for legal, same for payables, same for billing. As you can see, all the different functions of a law firm can be filled by a particular VA that can be replaced. And
All
in
right.
order for
So
that,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
like this concept, right? So just a couple quick practical questions because this is what comes to mind for me. All right. So I'm going to create a bunch of emails for the different roles or the functions in the firm, right? So admin at, marketing at, but can you make it so while that is the actual email address, like when I receive or the client receives an email that maybe has that person's actual name showing up, even though when you look at their email, or what does it say in the who it's from? It says admin at your firm's name. Like that doesn't
It's
sound like it
very
would work. How do you handle
Right.
that
It's
when
very
you're
easy.
emailing?
It does work to the extent that your email arrives to the recipient, admin at jason.com, but the subject line says something, and the signature line, the signature block, which is the most important part, the signature block can be individualized,
I see.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah. So that's helpful. That makes, an individual, yeah, it's personalized. So it's not just like at this point, somebody might be like, that could be a robot, literally an AI tool
no,
answering my questions here.
right.
So let me ask you this then, right? Because you do have all these functions, right? We all need to have these functions dealt with. And in talking to you before, you had said like one nice thing to know is you don't have to hire all of these people full time from the get go, right? Because maybe as a, accounts receivable or billing or whatever, you don't need a full time person. So you've suggested that you can start part time with the VAs before jumping into a full time hire and then just
Yeah.
managing it as you need it. So how does that
Yes.
work?
Absolutely. What I see being the most useful for an admin assistant, for example, it's probably 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day, then 6, then 8 full time, but 4 hours a day. It again depends on the function. If it's a marketing assistant, you don't need 4 hours a day at first. You can start with 2 hours a day. Billing, it might be 2 hours or four. It really depends on the function, but you can tell now you can mix and match, right? Now you have 4 hours of admin, 2 hours of marketing, and 2 hours of bookkeeping, for example. Now you have a good person here right there. That's a full-time employment right there for 8 hours a day.
So that's potentially a person that you can train them. They can do the admin. You
No, these
said
are
they can
three different people, like
three different people.
three
Okay.
different VAs, right?
Ah,
Because
okay.
again, the concept is you are working with specialists, and hiring specialists, of course, makes it so that you get a better product, better deliverable, faster, almost more specific to what you need. But then you combine that with three different professionals. So you have one professional, and I call them professionals. We call them VAs. That's what people know them as. I call them fellow professionals. So you have a professional admin, you have a professional marketing assistant, a professional bookkeeper. These are three different distinct individuals fulfilling a specific function in your organization.
Yeah, and it's good because the things you've just talked about, admin, billing, marketing, bookkeeping, especially, like these are all things that are massive time sucks. And so if you can find an individual that is quite good at each of those things separately, regardless of how much time it takes, where you are today and where you might be down the road, I think that's really encouraging to know that you can do that. And so when it comes to building out accountability within your practice, and like any of us, how does this function-based structure affect that in a more positive way than having somebody that's hire one VA that's responsible for all the things we're talking about?
Well, a good point would be if you lose one, if you lose your marketing assistant, you're not losing your admin assistant. You're not losing at the same time your bookkeeper. Now you have to go back and fill a function, let's say for 2 hours of marketing assistant. So you can still get work done, but because now that part of the puzzle just needs to be replaced. But if you had one person to do all three, now you have to go back into the marketplace and hope to get one person who can fill all three. That's a different challenge. It's one challenge to get a marketing assistant to fill in that plug. It's another to get one person replacing all three at the same time.
Yes, that really does solve a big problem because you talked about kind of that old school, almost unicorn like admin that could do it all back in the day. And I'm sure these people still exist. But yeah, when they leave, it's a massive gap in your operation, and replacing it is very difficult, if not completely impossible. And so, yeah, when you break these roles down into functions, yeah, replacing one function rather than someone that does everything would be a lot easier. What about cross training? Do you do that so some functions have some knowledge of what other people are doing, maybe to create redundancy? I know you've talked about that, even within your nicely broken down functions, to have redundancy there too. So if somebody leaves, then you have a backup there as well.
So very good question, Jason. What we do is we've trained 2 people for each function. Once again, because of the savings you have, obviously, you as the law firm, you may not be able to pay. You don't need to pay for 2. But I'm talking about our company, VA for Professionals. We always train a reliever. We call that a reliever. So a second chair. You have the first chair. They are the main account handler. And if that person gets sick, that person is out for whatever reason, you have the second chair coming in. The reliever comes in. So we always train two people for every function. And for me, when I was doing for the firm, I realized that for my legal assistant team, for example, the optimal was having three. Having three. That was based on the volume. I'm sorry?
That's a deep bench.
Right. Well, it was based on the volume of work we needed to get things done. But at the minimum, we had 2 at all time. Same thing with the admin assistant. Same thing with the marketing assistant. So, of course, we don't expect that an attorney would come and hire 2. So we just offer the second. No charge for them, but we get to train the reliever, the second chair. For them.
I see. So in this scenario, we're just talking about your service, VA professionals, professionals that, okay, if somebody hires, let's just say an admin VA, you're going to train a second person in that same role behind the scenes that somebody doesn't necessarily have to pay for. Because that was going to be my question. Now I'm hiring 2 people for each role and paying basically double the amount just in case somebody's sick. So I think that sounds really nice. But let's talk about, and I want to get into systems, and then we're going to get into even more fun stuff after that. But before we do, just in terms of envisioning, what does a well-structured virtual team look like for you, particularly as a firm is growing?
Okay. So essentially, I talked about the primary functions, right? We talked about admin. We talked about marketing. We talked about account payables. Then you have billing. Then you have legal for legal assistance. That's right there. That's the body of your team already. If you can have that one person or one part-time person for each one of these functions, you're well on your way to have this whole thing work well. Now, you talked earlier about accountability. So everyone needs to work together, but how do you do that? Well, I find that I tried at some point to have people work at night, as I talked about earlier, to deliver things in the morning. But then when we started scaling up, that became very difficult to manage. So pretty quickly, I realized they needed to work at the same time as I was working. Now, every VA works EST time from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And talk a second about why that is important.
Well, as attorneys, you need to have people respond very right there on the spot. We are in the business of quite often dealing with people's lives, people's well-being, emergencies, or at least urgencies of some kind of nature. It's not always feasible to expect an answer 24 hours later. You want people who can respond to you very quickly. So I found that over time, it was a lot more productive to have all the VAs, even the bookkeeper, work real time with us from 8 in the morning EST to 5 p.m. EST.
Yeah, and I would imagine that's important even if it's not so much you need something, but if they need something, they have a question, there's some feedback you need to give them. You can do that in the course of a normal business day. And as you're saying, it's not, I'm going to send an email, I'll get the response tomorrow, then I'll respond and back and forth. And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so the next, I want to talk about systems now. So of course, you hear from a lot of successful operators and entrepreneurs. When you have bad systems, I don't care how many people or how much technology you're using, the wheels are going to come off. The systems have to come before all of that stuff. It's really the idea is that the systems operate the business, right? And the people operate the systems. Yep. And of course the technology alongside of that. And so I think a lot of firm owners think sometimes they have a staffing problem, and really the problem is they have a systems problem. And so,
that's right.
And again, I've experienced this. If processes are unclear and inconsistent, or in some cases they're just in my head and I haven't shared it with anybody, just adding more people is just going to magnify the issue, right? Adding more technology, that's for scale, right? All of these things are for scale. And so if you have a problem with your systems, it's just going to create more problems more quickly. What systems do firms need before you really start thinking about scale? And I imagine you could do this concurrently. Okay, I need help. I need to hire a VA, but know that you need to put systems in place right alongside that. And maybe a VA can help you do that to a degree. But what are some of the most common system failures you see inside a law firm that people need to fix right like today before they even start hiring a VA?
I'll start with the most sensitive one, collection. Billing and collection. I found that the greatest return on investment for me was really when we brought in a full-time bookkeeper, billing, and collection virtual assistant. And she really helped us. Now we have a team of people now, which she supervises. She really helped us staying close to the money, essentially. Sending the bills out, and I'm sure since your audience is primarily attorneys, a lot of attorneys will recognize themselves in that. If you don't send the bills out, nobody will pay, or very few people will come knocking at the door to pay. And unless your bills are out, the money is not coming. And we are so busy getting the work done. Great work. Most of us are good lawyers. But if we don't send the bills out, they won't get paid. And one thing, a side benefit of having VAs, I've found, is it forces you to think about your business in terms of functions and systems. It forces you to think about it from outside because now you have to teach someone. And also, as you rightly pointed out, the VAs can help you do that. It's very easy. You tell them, okay, this is how I do it. Now go do it and document it.
What are some ways of doing that, right? I've looked, there's certainly tools that can help sort of record your screen. I mean, I've tried it in a million different ways. I mean, I think the way we've ultimately settled is we create like an SOP, which is basically in a spreadsheet. It's a list of steps. And then each of those steps, there's a playbook for, or maybe it's the reverse. I think we call it a playbook, and then the SOPs to how to do each of those steps. But I know you've talked about just using a tool like Loom to say, okay, this is how we're going to document what we're doing here. And then that's how you transfer the knowledge and create the system. What are some of the tools and approaches you take to creating these systems so that when you do hire a VA, they know what the heck they're supposed to be doing?
Right. So even before, I mean, AI is everything now and everywhere. Now there are tools you can really just do the thing, and the AI gives you the SOPs to go with it. But I do find that over the years, what worked very well was train once and forget it, right? So what we would do, we would train and record everything. So that's another reason why I think we talked about how I require all our teams, all our VAs are within Zoom space, because anytime we want to train them on something, we record it and we call We save it in a training library. So you have a training library for admin assistant, a training library for marketing assistant, a training library, so on and so forth. So now the next time you hire someone new, you don't have to sit with them again and teach them exactly what you taught the last person. Now you have them sit for 2 days, if need be, watch all those videos, train yourself, and get to work. So documenting everything is key, whether it's videos, and now with AI tools, you can have the SOPs generated just by watching you do it. Whatever it is, the tools may change, but the principle remains the same. Document, train once, and forget it.
And so you mentioned you record it. And just for people, just to be clear on what that means, you're talking about you're recording your screen, you're recording
Correct.
yourself. I use Loom. There's a little picture of me on the bottom talking, but essentially it's me doing the task. And then, as you say, you stick that in a library now and label it all properly. So somebody wants to understand how to do something, they don't need to come to you. They can go watch it. Even
That's
if
it.
it's, 100 videos, they can watch them for 2 days. Or if they have a question, they can check the library, watch and Loom, I suppose, is a good tool. There's other ones out there. And as you say, these tools may change, but the approach is to document. And is there a way for you, as you delegate, create accountability for doing this? Is there a way to do all of that without micromanaging people? Because I think this is the next thing. You've hired somebody, you've created some sort of system of what they're supposed to be doing, but then, of course, it's not going to be perfect the first time. And how do you handle that? That's the problem I've always had, right? Especially if you're somebody who has, I'm not saying I'm a high achiever, I'm not, but there are people that are high achievers, they have very high standards. What is the balance there? What you should accept and just move on versus I'm going to micromanage the hell out of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with that, honestly, sometimes.
Well, that makes two of us. I call myself a recovering perfectionist, and that's been the case
Yeah.
for 20 years. You're never out of it completely, but you do have to appreciate and realize the fact that it's better that someone would do it 90% as well as you would do it, maybe even 80% as well as you would do it, but gets it done versus it's remaining on your desk and never getting done. So once you reconcile yourself with that fact, you understand that the extra 20% you could have added to the perfection of the task, most of the times doesn't matter.
Right.
At the end of the day, most of the time doesn't matter. Now, that said, talking about how do you supervise, I believe in reporting systems, and I found that no more than 5 to 6 people reporting to me directly, it's manageable. So when my team became bigger than that, we created a position for an office manager. And it was her job to have all the people reporting to her. And also for the law firm, it's kind of easy, I think, to structure things in such a way. You have the admin side of things, when I talk the business management part of it, the admin, the marketing, etc. And then you have the production side, the legal side, where you have your legal assistants, your associates, and those two, you can have one person overseeing that once you start having associates, and on the other you have someone else, and then you are essentially having those two people reporting to you.
And so
So
essentially you could build teams within these functional roles, right? Now
that's right.
you've stopped, you said, okay, let me try to document, create a system. I'm going to hire a VA to implement that system. And now that role, say it's your marketing role, you're really busy, you're doing a lot of marketing. That person can now have other people helping them achieve a greater
Correct.
number of tasks, and those folks answer to them. And then that person, I guess, at the top of the org, that portion of the org chart is the one that answers to you.
Correct. And at the end of the day, it always comes down to the person you hired, right? The person. So that's why you want to be super, super careful about that. Who do you hire? In my experience, there are a lot of very competent, young, or even experienced people in the Philippines. It's a young population, very well educated. Everyone we hire has at least a 2-year college, for any position, and most of them have a 4-year college degree. So once you hire the right people, now you empower them to take the lead on the team, for example. Let's say you even have 2 people in your admin team. One of them can take the lead. It doesn't
And
matter
then
that you have only two.
let me ask you this, and then I want to get into what I think is the best part of the show here around creating AI-enabled virtual assistants. but I love this. But before we get to that, just the last question in terms of hiring a VA, what are some of the ways or some of the approaches you use in addition to making sure they have at least 3 years of college that you're hiring somebody that's good? Do you give them some work up front that you'll pay them for, a small project just to test out? Obviously, people can interview well, but then maybe their work product sucks. What are some of the tactics you have to ensure that you're giving yourself the best chance of hiring the best quality VA that you're not going to have to then let go and cycle through another hire?
Right, right. So first, you have to think about the technology part, right? Without good technology, good connectivity, it's not going to work. And you have to be aware of the fact that not everywhere in the Philippines has good connection, good internet connection, a stable connection. So you have to be mindful of that, and also make sure that they have the right equipment. That's one. That's the technical part. In terms of the work, yes, you absolutely you don't want to give them the keys to the kingdom before they have shown the ability to produce work. So you will give them a project and see how they handle it, how do they ask questions. They quite often, sometimes it's cultural. They want to please, they want you to be satisfied, and they won't ask you questions. So there's this aspect, this element. In the U.S., in the West, we are very upfront. We ask questions, we question everything, but they won't always do that. So you have to be prepared for that, making sure that they understood the task in order to make sure that they deliver what you want them to deliver. So you have to be mindful of the cultural differences, of course, but an intelligent person in the U.S. is the same as an intelligent person in the Philippines or anywhere else. If they get it, they'll produce it.
Yeah, so I want to get into now what you've called AI-enabled virtual assistants, and the other part
yes.
that I love is leverage on top of leverage, right? That's taking your VA, you're leveraging that person. But now this conversation gets a lot more interesting once you then layer some AI on top of it, right? And of course, AI is everywhere and everything these days. And I think a lot of times people think about virtual assistants and AI as just completely separate topics. But what you're talking about is that the real opportunity now is when you combine the two. And as I've said, you describe that as leverage on top of leverage. I love that. So what does an AI virtual assistant actually look like? What is that?
Well, an AI-enabled virtual assistant, it's basically a virtual assistant who's been trained and who's competent in using AI tools and using it in her function, all right? Not to be, once again, we remain consistent in terms of our function. We're not trying to have one person do everything just because there is AI. No, you have an admin assistant becoming a much better, efficient admin assistant by using AI tools that help her become that better admin assistant. Same thing for a marketing assistant. I remember 3-4 years ago when this AI thing became a real thing, people started telling me, I think it was maybe 2.5 years ago, people saying, well, the VA thing is outdated, it's passé, it's done because AI can do their job. Yes, to a point. Yes, to a point. Unless you want to be doing AI generation of everything all day, your marketing, your admin, your bookkeeping, your account payables, do it yourself every day, all day. Good luck with that. Now, you see, you still have a spot for somebody else. You're going to delegate that responsibility. And if you're still thinking in terms of function, that person is your VA, now empowered and enabled with AI to produce greater amount of work, more precise, more accurate from the beginning. So I had friends who were making fun of me sometimes, say, oh, AI will replace all your VAs. Well, who's laughing now?
Because you make a great point, right? Sure, like AI can do a lot of stuff, but somebody's got to manage the AI. It's not completely autonomous yet. Certainly not my experience. AI still can produce a lot of garbage. But more than that, I think, is when you have someone, a human being, that's managing an AI in a particular function, as you put it, they get much better at it than you're going to ever get at all of that stuff. And so they're just, again, we're talking about creating systems and then using leverage to scale. And so the first thing is maybe AI, system, person, technology. You layer all those things in together and you do it in the right order in the right way. Now you're onto something. You're not creating more problems for yourself. You're now really getting to a place where you're creating the solutions. And so how do you set that up? Are you giving them, and I spoke to Ernie, the attorney, of course, last week, and talking about replacing traditional SOPs with either prompts or now skills, specific skills, meaning skills that defined as they're defined within Claude. How are you approaching that with your VAs and marrying those two in a very highly functional way?
Yeah, so I think of AI as an additional staff member, to be honest, as an additional staff member. So granted, you may not need, where you needed 10 VAs for a function, you may not need 10 VAs anymore, but you will still need VAs. So how do you do that? And I agree with Ernie. I remember talking to Ernie about some of that before, and it is your library of prompts becomes your IP, right? Your intellectual property, your library of prompts. So now if you develop a prompt that gives you the proper outcome, now you can just give that prompt to your VA and she produces the same outcome the previous one was producing. Now, we use that for a marketing team, for example, and I can tell you, it's not everything out there that AI comes out with that's ready to go. For example, what was it? More recently, AI created a picture of this one person at the desk because it was the theme was for an attorney. You had a gavel on the desk. How many lawyers work with a gavel on their desk?
Yeah, that'd be
Right?
weird.
Right. That would be weird, right? So AI thought it was appropriate to put a gavel on the desk because it was marketing for an attorney. So you do need to have someone to look at that. But the prompt generated something that was very good, but that still needed to have the VA take a look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Because again, AI is helpful and it accelerates a lot of what we can do, but it's not perfect. I know I use AI all day, but I'm editing, I'm redoing the prompts, or I'm having it fix things, and you need a human being to have the judgment to see that there's a problem. There's a gavel on a lawyer's desk, something doesn't quite make sense there. We need to keep working on this to get it to the finished product. So let me ask you this, just within a firm, what are the tasks in your view that become dramatically more efficient when now AI is injected into the workflow?
Wow, that's a good question. Well,
I mean, you mentioned marketing. Clearly that
I don't want to
marketing.
say I don't want to say everything, but I do think that not everything. If you have a VA that's enabled by AI, she's powerful to you. Marketing for sure, whether it's the content, the visual support, those kind of things. Admin as well, because there are automations you can put in and have her do more work in less amount of time. I see it also even for the legal assistants in terms of research. We see it maybe less for now, at least with the bookkeeping function. The numbers go in and that's kind of what it is, but progressively it's coming. So the low-hanging fruit, I think, in terms of AI-enabled VA, it's really marketing, admin, and legal assistant in that order, I would say. Yeah.
And those are all hugely important roles in the firm, and again, can suck up a lot of time for somebody trying to do those things themselves. So now when you take, okay, I've got a person and now they're AI enabled, is that person now able to do even more work than what was an individual VA was able to do? They can do the work of theoretically multiple people.
Yes, but not only more work, I think it's better work, not just quantity, but quality as well. And I think it also, what I've seen with my VAs, it really engages them in their job, their function even more. I've seen that with the marketing assistant. I've seen that with the legal assistant. When their interaction with the AI, that's giving them new things to think about, angles that they may not have thought of, makes them better professionals themselves. I mean, me as an attorney myself, I think I'm a better attorney with the help of AI simply because have done this for a long time, but still, you don't think of every possibility just because you've done it for 30 years. Now you have this tool that allows you to think about it from a different angle. And now you can go even further than the AI now simply because you have that new perspective. So I do think that it's not simply speed or just quantity. It's really quality if you marry the two, the
Yeah.
human judgment, as you put it, and the contextual learning that people are able to do, and then the sheer power of the AI has access to so much information.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So, all right, let's talk about tools for a second. What tools do you recommend your virtual assistants should be using on a regular basis every day? Are they free tools, paid tools, legal specific, all of that stuff? I've had conversations with other folks about AI and the different types of tools and being concerned about data privacy, all these type of things. So
Right.
what are the tools that people should be using at least to start with, and maybe how should they use them and be mindful of sticking proprietary or client information into those tools and having an issue with that?
Probably all the above. But this is the way I train the VAs for the firm, and we train the VAs for the company as well. Everything that we put into the AI platform never has the name of the client, specifics about the client. This is important. I find it important, at least.
So you
So
anonymize all of the
correct,
information you're putting in it.
correct. Whether you call the client, Mr. X or Mr. Gabriel Marous will not impact the outcome, right? So Mr. X, Mrs. This, everybody is anonymized, and I think that's the most important part you should do.
Yeah, and that seems like a very simple solution because I've heard lots of different ways of dealing with that stuff. But yeah, I think the simplest thing is just don't put any identifiable information into your prompts and such. So you've talked about prompts a little while ago and how they essentially become a form of intellectual property when you're in your firm. Mm-hmm. And I know systems historically, those have been something along those lines in a firm or a business that has really good systems in place versus one that doesn't is a more valuable firm. And so what do you mean by that when you say these prompts are a form of intellectual property?
Well, it's something that you produced in the course of your business, and whether you want to take it with you when you sell the business is a whole different question. But for sure, the buyer would see value in your firm by having already those things in place. Because as I said before, if you have AI-enabled VAs with the proper prompts, you can substitute the VAs and get the same outcome, same product.
Yeah,
so that's
I think
why
that's what people want when they're buying a business. They want to know when they buy that business is going to be able to function and produce the same amount of profit without the current owner and with you as an owner than it did before. And that seems like a very good way to ensure that's happening.
For sure. I mean, as we were talking about earlier, how a law firm with a very experienced person, if you sell your practice and that person goes with you, it's a different market value altogether than if that person stays. So here, you're no longer talking about an individual, you're talking about a library of prompts for specific functions. And anyone coming into that function is handed that library of prompts for that function. You can just imagine how quickly they become useful, how quickly they are able to help you with your practice. It's just a matter of changing people.
And so earlier we were talking about SOPs, and you essentially create these video libraries on how to do every single task. Is this replacing that effectively to say, okay, it's nice to have the video library and all the SOPs on how to do everything, but as you say, if you can develop a set of prompts that give you consistent outcomes, do those prompts then basically say you don't even have to bother watching these videos, just utilize these prompts to get the outcome we're looking for in this particular task?
So to an extent, yes. However, you always there's more than just a prompt. There's the mindset, the attitude of the VAs, of whoever you hire. You don't really hire for skills, especially now the skills can be taught quite easily and quickly. You hire for attitude and for intelligence. Can they learn? Well, they went to school for 2 years, 4 years. They can learn. Now, do they have the right attitude? Yes. Okay, now you can teach them. So, to me, it is important to still have that some of those recordings just to give them the way you think about things. Not so long ago, I read an article, I forgot where, but the article was talking about how AI has the negative impact on young attorneys because young attorneys are able to find a solution, but without the practice of getting to the solution, right? And there's a much more learning to be done in arriving to the right solution, knowing this doesn't work, than having the right solution. So I think it's somewhere around that. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, it sounds like to have those SOPs and the video it at least gives you a lot of context around what you're doing, because if you don't have that, then you're just almost like a robot interacting with another robot trying to get an outcome, and not and probably, as you're saying, that's the way somebody's going to miss that there's a gavel on an attorney's desk that shouldn't be there. They're just not going to understand that that's not going to be there. So I can see how the SOPs don't disappear completely. They provide a lot of context, and then the technology, the AI, just becomes a tool to help get things
Correct.
done
Correct.
a little bit easier.
I want to say something that I think is important, especially for us attorneys. I tell my staff all the time, by virtue of you working with a law firm, I consider you an attorney. Not because you went to law school, not because you passed the bar, but because I need you to think as an attorney. And I think the way you develop that on your team is really by giving them context, allow them to understand how and why did you come to that solution so that they can perpetrate that concept or that attitude with the rest of the team. Because hopefully you hire one, but you have many more after that. And if all they have is a library of prompts, you're missing the context and the culture of a law firm. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that's a perfect lead into the next kind of thing I want to get into, and that's training and supervision of a virtual office, right? It's not, oh, you're hired, here's your prompt library, get to work, it better be good. You've been building and managing these remote teams for years, and I know that you've developed a very intentional operating system around how to really do that so that people are feeling they're part of a company and a culture, and they understand what their jobs are and how to get their own questions answered. So how do you think, in terms of managing a virtual team, is different for you than maybe some other people might think about it? And I know you have some techniques, and I want to talk about more of those things.
Yeah, here's the fun part. I mean, personally, I don't like HR, but most people I don't think do, but those who don't can relate with that. For me, and your HR, your team is all about making sure that they catch the idea from the beginning so that you don't have to recreate the wheel every time. So how do you achieve that? How did we achieve that in a virtual space for my law firm? I can speak to that point. It's really trying to recreate in a virtual world, the physical world. So, for example, we had an office with 10, 12 people. You had a receptionist. Someone walks into the office, well, you talk to the receptionist. Then you go to this conference room to meet with the client, etc., etc. Zoom, for example, and whatever you use, it's up to you. But we use Zoom because we find that we can really recreate that space. So in Zoom, when you arrive in the main room, we call that the lobby. So you always have someone, an admin assistant will go as soon before they accept you. They will go in the lobby, then allow you in, welcome you to Marous Law, for example, whatever your firm's name is, and say, welcome to the firm. I know you have an appointment with Mr. Jason. I'm going to move you to conference room number 1. What is that? Just a breakout room. But just by virtue of you doing that, that makes the client feel, oh, wow, I was expected, I'm welcomed, and there's a process that makes them feel good. So they move them into a conference room, then you meet them there in the conference room, you have your meeting, and then someone comes and say, well, after this is what's going to happen. You'll get a summary of our meeting. All of that happens in a virtual world, but with the mindset of recreating what we would have done in a physical world. Now, in terms of the work, We
Yeah,
all
so I
work.
like that. That sounds really compelling. Client facing, they show up in the lobby, they go into a conference
Mm-hmm.
room. As you say, it very much mimics what they would experience in the real world. And especially people that are a little bit older, probably the ones that are paying for your legal services. That, I think, adds a level of connection
For
and
sure.
quality to what they're doing. So how does that
Mm-hmm.
work now on the other side in terms of the internal, the team working together?
Right, right. Perfect. Good question. So we have this virtual office space, just like we are here. Let's say all 15 of us, we're in that space where we can see each other. We are all muted. And if a call comes in, so we can actually see each other. And we have one office clerk physically at the office, for example, because there's still old-fashioned mail to be opened and scanned. And once it is scanned, the virtual team takes over. But she jumps in just the same. She is in that virtual space. She can talk to her colleagues and say, hey, I have a call coming in, or let's say the admin assistant has a call. I have a call coming in for you. What extension should I send it to? They can see each other and they can interact. Now, if they need to have to talk about something specific, we have a breakdown of conference rooms. We have the bookkeeping conference room, the legal conference room, or whatever. That's just a series. And in fact, on Zoom, you can preset that. And every time you open your Zoom, all those conference rooms open as well. So you don't have to do it every morning. We have the same link all for several months at the time. The office manager opens the Zoom room in the morning. Everybody checks in at 8 o'clock. We
People
work in
showing up
that.
for work?
People showing up for work. That's right. Everybody comes in at 8 o'clock. We have 5 minutes just checking in with everybody. Everybody's okay. Now everybody gets to work. Now we have meetings. We go to our separate conference rooms. And then at the end of the day, we come all together or whatever the situation may be. Whenever the point is this, whenever they don't need to interact meetings or whatever, everyone comes into a general room where we see each other. And that's the key. For me, 30 years that I've been doing this, a lot of what I've learned was by osmosis, being around older attorneys, around super paralegals, secretaries who knew better than I did. I picked up on all of that. So it's hard to recreate it, but this comes the closest I have found because some conversations, the new person can pick up on a few things here and there. We don't have all conversations all day long in the general room, otherwise it would be disruptive to the work. But if it's just, hey, Mrs. So-and-so just called, can you call her back? Now someone heard that, everybody heard that, whether it's the marketing team, anybody, they heard that. So that keeps some level of togetherness, collegiality, where everybody's working together. And I think that, to your point earlier, culture, maintaining the firm culture, that goes a very long way versus having people working separately virtually, never seeing each other, just exchanging deliverables here and there. That's not a firm.
Yeah, it really does personalize things quite a bit because, yeah, you mentioned two things that I think we've lost a lot of. I mean, the remote work stuff is nice in a lot of ways, but yeah, those little things you learn from just having a conversation with somebody that you're not going to have if you're just trading deliverables back and forth, and then also the culture aspect of it. So, just so I understand, when you show up to work in the morning, you log into Zoom, and while you're working throughout the day, you have a screen where you could see everybody on your team head down, working, doing whatever they're working. And now, so that sounds like a yes. And then to go a step further, if you had a question for them or if they need to get a hold of you, you're there and they can do that. Is that essentially what you're describing? Like, hey, I want to ask Tom, he's working accounts payable. I want to, or billable or whatever it is. I need a question about him. Now, do you just go right at him and interrupt him in the workflow? Or?
No, I would just tell them, hey, I want to talk to you about billing. Can we go to the billing room? So especially for billing, not everybody needs to be part of that process. So then you're not having that
conversation while everyone else is going, all right. You just, and then you two go off, you have the conversation, you come back into the main room.
The main room. That's right. That's right. We call that the ML office, Marous Law, ML office. Everybody's there. And only two people, actually the office manager, myself, and one more person, the admin assistant, the primary one, can be a co-host. So not everybody can move everybody. You have some people have the power to move people around. And to your point earlier, yes, even I come in, I check in 8 o'clock. with everybody. I get an opportunity to see how everybody is, how everybody is doing. For example, there was an earthquake recently, a Sunday ago in the Philippines. I was able to check in on my people immediately. I know which one were not able to check in, what happened to them. Immediately, I know. So I check in every morning at 8 o'clock. Everybody takes their lunch break from 12 to 1. And then I check out me later, but most of them check out at 5 o'clock. So it really, I think it makes it easy for people to see that you are in this together with them. You're leading by example, and then you are available. If you need to work, we say production time, or I move myself to a breakout room where I don't want you to bother me. For 2 hours, heads down, this is focus time. But the rest of the time, you're there. They see you there, and that goes a long way.
It's an interesting approach. And so you mentioned you use Zoom to do all that, and of course that's the tool for that. Are there any other key tools in terms of managing your team, helping them understand what they need to be doing and how to do it and so on, like things that are core to the operation?
Right. So I use Slack. I've used Slack for as long as it's been available, I think. So you have to be able to communicate, going back to the VA thing, you have to be able to communicate with your VA real time, right? And there's the communication, and there's also keeping things so that you can go back a few weeks if need be. I've found that it's not necessary to pay to get the paid option of Slack if people are mindful not to increase expenses. 3 months back is more than enough. More than enough. So with your VA, you will be communicating on Slack. Then in our case, our VA company offers a Zoom space where you can jump in, talk to your VA at any time of the day while they're working for you. And then talking about the server. This is important, right? So server-wise, it has to be cloud-based, obviously. Most people nowadays use O365, right? So Microsoft OneDrive. That works very well. You can give access, remote access, limit access. So a good server, Zoom, if you're using a VA with our company, you get into our Zoom that we provide. Slack. I prefer Slack over email exchange because email, we already get too many of those. And if the staff, the VA just has a quick question, you just want to get to
And Slack, do you use that largely like a project management tool? In other words, okay, there's a section for billing, there's a section for marketing, and then of course we have a history of all the different things we're working on. And so I just want to be clear, like if you need to speak to someone verbally, you can use that quickly in your Zoom, but the rest of the communications going on, project specific, matter specific, in a tool like Slack, something that...
Absolutely. There is a logic to the madness. We're still going back to functions. So even our Slack is based on functions. So you have marketing, you have admin, you have legal, you have billing, you have all the same. And depending on what the channel is, we have those people who should know part of that channel. Right? So whenever you have a conversation about billing, you don't need the entire firm to be involved.
Right.
Right? So just the same. Like I said, it remain consistent. It's about functions, function. And everything is built around it. The systems are built around that. The VAs are trained based on that logic, and AI is added to compound the effect. Leverage over leverage, as we were talking about, of having functions.
I love that. Functions, and then build out everything you need around that, the people, the technology, etc. So, okay,
Correct.
so we've covered a lot of different things here today. We were talking about leverage, I think, overall, but using virtual assistants into systems, into AI-enabled teams, and all basically the future of law firm staffing here. But for somebody that's listening to this who wants to take some action, maybe never hired a VA before, hasn't had the best experience, obviously they're probably dabbling with AI a little bit, but what's the next thing? What's the first step they should take, let's say this month?
Start small. I've seen people try and fail because they thought they would revamp their entire firm over the matter of 2 or 3 months. So start small and think long term. It didn't take you a week or 2 weeks to be where you are. It won't take a couple of weeks for you to be out of it. And if you as an attorney is thinking about finding solutions, it's because you already have the pain point, right? You already have the pain point, whether it's VAs, whether it's AI, but you are thinking about it because you're experiencing the pain. It didn't take you 2 weeks to get to that pain point. It won't take 2 weeks to get out of it. So it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term solution, long-term outlook. So start small. I like to think, as you said from the top, admin is the low-hanging fruits. Where returning phone calls, checking your calendar, calling clients before appointments, follow-ups. These are the low-hanging fruits. So that you don't have to do, that somebody else can do, that someone else can do for you from anywhere on the planet. So that's starting small. Then be committed to it for a long time. When I say a long time, it should be at least 3 months. You think about it long term. And then after that, progressively, you start adding. You add duties to the same person, to the admin assistant. Let's say you start with 4 hours. And you can get your own. I'm not saying that for that you get my company or whatever, but I think it's a general advice, really. You find your own VA, delegate small, commit to a long term, and then progressively you add tasks to that one VA, because you will develop a way of working with them. They will understand you, how you communicate. Make sure you have a platform to communicate with them. We talked about Slack. We talked about Zoom. We talked about having a server to exchange information. You may, especially for an admin, I would for sure make sure that they have an extension on your voice over IP phone system, so that when they call clients or return phone calls on your behalf, it's not a Filipino number showing, but your office number showing, right? So start small, commit to the long term, and progressively add to the same function first. And once you have a full grasp on those 4 hours, if you want to try to add someone else, then you can start thinking about that. So that's the way I would approach it.
Yeah, that's some great advice. So, okay, I'm here with Gabriel Marous. We've been talking about how law firms can use VAs, systems, and then AI to create leverage on top of leverage. But the whole goal here, right, eliminate bottlenecks and ultimately build more scalable firms that can do a lot more than just what we can do ourselves. And so if you want to connect with Gabriel, you can do it at his law firm, marouslaw.com. Also, you can learn more about his company, VA for Professionals, at vaforprofessionals.com. And before the show, Gabriel was saying if anyone wants to inquire about his service, if they mention this podcast, he's willing to offer a very deep discount for their first month. So go ahead and check out what Gabriel's doing over at vaforprofessionals.com if you need that kind of help. But anyway, all of this stuff, I'm going to include links to it in the show notes. And Gabriel, before we jump off here, anything else you want to add? Have we missed anything here today? We've covered quite a lot of ground.
Yeah, we covered a whole lot. But I would say that to my fellow lawyers out there, I'm happy to just talk to you guys. If you want to just connect with me, even on LinkedIn, find me, we can chat. I'm happy to, especially when it comes to attorneys. I've gone through it. I'm happy to share the tricks, the things I've learned. And when I talk to other people from other podcasts as well, they do that and they find it is valuable. Even if you never use my VA for Professionals company, I'm just happy to share with you what I've learned over the years. And I think if you didn't learn anything from this podcast, you might learn something when you talk to me as well. So.
Well, that's kind of you. That's a very generous offer. I'll make sure to include your LinkedIn in the show notes as well, so people can connect with you there. Because I know you're a busy guy. I mean, I had trouble just connecting with you. So that, again, that's kind of you to offer.
Sorry about that.
No. So in any case, I'll make sure all this info, you can get a hold of Gabriel. You can learn more from him if you need to learn more about VAs and wrapping those VAs and some AI prompts. I definitely like the sound of all that. But this is Gabriel Marous, everybody. That's going to be it for today. We've got a lot of cool episodes coming up, so stay tuned. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.